FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome, and you are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's 11/26/18. Hey, almost done with the year. You'll remember our good friend Mark Shaw was on the show. He had a new book out. It's about a year and a half ago called The Reporter Who Knew Too Much, The Mysterious Death of What's My Line TV star and media icon Dorothy Kilgallen. A very strange death indeed. All the years that have gone by, this goes back to 1965. All the time that has gone by, this death's never really been properly executed. And Mark Shaw, noted author. Mark, you've been researching this for quite a while. And hey, the Manhattan DA said, nothing to see here, move along. But you haven't been sitting still. You've got yet more information coming out. So, hey, first, welcome back to the show. Hey, and if anyone wants to get involved, the email address is kl@kerrylutz.com. And welcome back, and tell us what you've been up to here.
Well, thanks. As you know, Dorothy Kilgallen, we can mention the connection there with you because her youngest son was named Kerry. Yep. And I believe your mother was quite a fan of What's My Line and Dorothy and all of that. And so your namesake is Dorothy's son. And I got interested in, as you know, because I'd learned that the death of Dorothy in 1965, they said she died of a drug overdose and alcohol. It was nothing. It wasn't accidental at all. It was murder. I'd proved that in The Reporter Who Knew Too Much. Basically, not one barbiturate in her stomach, but 3. For those who don't remember, Dorothy Kilgallen was a famous media icon in the 1950s and 60s, most known for being a star panelist on What's My Line, but she was more than that. She was a syndicated columnist to 200 newspapers across the country, had a radio show with the family around the table that was listened to by 1 million people every week, and was a crack investigative reporter who investigated many of the high-profile trials of the 20th century, Dr. Sam Shepard that became the fugitive, Lindbergh baby kidnapping case, and, of course, Jack Ruby's trial, the man who shot Lee Harvey Oswald. So I went ahead and published The Reporter Who Knew Too Much. We're very blessed. It was a bestseller. Movie rights were optioned and all of that, and I was really done, Kerry, but listeners to shows like yours and readers of the book kept getting in touch with me with new information about Dorothy, about Dorothy's death, her life and times, and her JFK assassination, which was 18 months long in 1963 and 64. So I kept this file, and pretty soon I came up with 3 or 4 reasons as to why a new book would make sense. Number one, I discovered more evidence that Dorothy had been murdered in 1965, including admissions by her daughter. My mother was killed. One of Dorothy's, Jill's best friends, who said, I heard that Dorothy was quieted. That kind of information. I also learned more about the main suspect in her death, Ron Pataki, a journalist that was close to Dorothy when she died, to the effect that he was the last person to see her alive, and that the poems he wrote about her had facts in them that only the killer could have known. Also, I was convinced that the New York District Attorney's Office investigation last year that we talked about last time was really bogus. They had never talked to any of the witnesses I gave them or looked at documents and things like that. And if that wasn't enough, I was able, through a reader of the book, to secure and analyze what I believe are the most important JFK assassination documents in history, the Jack Ruby trial transcripts, which we can talk about because they directly relate to what Dorothy knew about the assassination and what put her in danger.
And she was sitting in the front row of the courtroom as they testified, correct? As he testified.
Yeah, and that's what separates her from everybody else who's ever covered the assassinations, including me. All the reporters, Oliver Stone in his movie, everybody who wrote about this, nobody's ever, had the advantage that Dorothy had and that I had. by writing these two books, and Dorothy was right there in that front row. She interviewed Ruby twice, only reporter to do so. She exposed his Jack Ruby testimony before the Warren Commission before it was supposed to be exposed. I mean, she was really on the ball, wrote all of these articles that are on the DorothyKilgallenStory.org about the JFK assassination, questioning, blasting J. Edgar Hoover's Oswald alone theory. So I call Dorothy the most credible reporter to have ever covered the JFK assassination, and that's certainly not an exaggeration at all.
Well, I don't know if you ever had a chance, Mark, to see that documentary. I think it was a BBC documentary, The Men Who Killed Kennedy. Mm-hmm. And I remember watching the first 8 episodes, and there never was a 9th episode because they were sued, and it was forced off the air. And it was, it basically said that Mac Wallace, I think was his name, he was LBJ's personal hitman, and basically implicated LBJ. And you can find that episode on YouTube in its entirety. And I saw it like 25 years after I saw the PBS special, The Men Who Killed Kennedy, and it was mind-blowing.
Well, it might be, but the question, though, is, again, what is credible? And, I can say things, whatever they had in that documentary, they can say those things and everything. But unless they're based on primary source witnesses, people who were there, all of that, then you have, some real problems with that credibility. Mm-hmm. That's where these Ruby trial transcripts make such a difference. And I posted them. I don't know if the publisher's happy or not. I posted them, the ones that are in the book, up on markshawbooks.com. And if I may, I can just give you an idea, because everybody who's heard about this has just been shocked. Yeah. They've never heard anything like this. Remember that Jack Ruby always said that he wasn't part of any plot to kill the president. He just came along, walked by the Dallas Police Department basement where they were transferring Oswald, and then shot him. Well, that's a bunch of baloney based on these documents that I secured and analyzed. For instance, there is testimony in there that Jack Ruby, I'm going to say this slowly so people get it, Jack Ruby actually watched the assassination. He was at the Dallas Morning News offices on the morning that JFK was killed, and he was watching the assassination in Dealy Plaza from a window there that faced right into Dealy Plaza. Well, that just
what a coincidence. What a coincidence.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it isn't a coincidence, in fact, and I know you mean that. So that is just a shocking development, and anybody who believes this Oswald alone theory stuff and anything else, I think, even the LBJ and CIA and everything, I don't believe they can ever produce primary source witnesses like the ones at trial. Dorothy's sitting in the front row. What else does she hear? She hears a guy named Hallmark who owns a parking lot right across from Jack Ruby's Carousel Club, and he first testifies that Ruby has parked his car there for 3 years, and the day before he shoots Oswald, he comes over, and they ask him, when he came into your garage, did he ask permission, Ruby, to use the phone? Yes, he did. This was around 2:50 p.m., and then the guy says, and I heard Ruby talking about that he had gotten into the Dallas Police Department for that Oswald press conference on Friday night, acting like a reporter. What did he say in reference to being a reporter? He said he was making like a reporter. Making like a reporter? Yes. And then it goes on to something that's even more shocking, and that is that this man listens to Ruby on the phone, and he says, did Ruby say anything in reference to whether or not, concerning whether or not he might be there when Oswald was transferred? Did he say anything on there? And here's the 4 words that I think change everything. He told whoever he was talking to that he would be there. That he would be there, yes, which means that Ruby said, I will be there. He goes on to talk about that he got into the basement making like a reporter, having a pencil and notebook, and that his friends in the police department helped him to get into that basement. Well, all of this, Dorothy heard, and this is what some of it she put in her columns. And this is the kind of material, Carrie, that she was going to put in that book she was writing for Random House, and they couldn't let her do that.
Well, shocking. So I always thought that he spontaneously just happened by there, saw Oswald, and shot him. And but obviously you knew that couldn't be true because you just couldn't get into the basement of the Dallas police garage as a regular citizen, right? You had to have some type of clearance or some way of getting in there, correct?
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Egypt is on the verge, once again, becoming a world-renowned gold producer. The Golden Age is being rediscovered. For millennia, ancient Egyptian kingdoms prospered from unparalleled riches. Pharaohs built their empires and flaunted their abundant wealth that was made possible by the country's resource-rich gold deposits. Despite this rich history, modern Egypt remains one of the most underdeveloped gold mining countries in the world. Aton Resources is at the center of the modern Egyptian mining world, diligently working both as the only public exploration company in Egypt today and as the advocate for mining reform with the Egyptian government. However, those that arrive early like Aton will reap the best rewards. Aton's discovery of the legendary Lost Mountain of Gold at Rodruin and its current aggressive drilling program there could potentially reap those rewards. Aton Resources is focused on its 100% owned Abu Marawat concession in the Arabian-Nubian Shield, located 200 kilometers north of Centamin Sakari's world-class gold mine. Aton possesses first-mover advantage in the underfollowed jurisdiction of Egypt, which is currently undergoing mining reform. To stay on top of Aton's latest drill results and news, go to atonresources.com. Aton trades on the TSX-V under the ticker AAN and on the OTC under the ticker ANLBF.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Well, and you and the listeners are probably saying, wait a minute, did everybody miss this? Mm-hmm. And I have to say, yes, me too. It was hiding in plain sight all these years. You can actually find the transcripts up on the internet if you go far enough and find them. But nobody was ever to analyze. Nobody ever printed them. They're in no book at all. It's never been seen. We have investigated the newspapers at the time that this testimony came out. They didn't even mention it. Yeah. And I got a juror's spiral notebook that I show in the book. And on the day this testimony came up, he didn't even write about it. Now, why was that? Well, here's why. J. Edgar Hoover, right from the beginning, if you remember, was shouting, Oswald alone, Oswald alone. In fact, the government documents, the few of them that came out last fall, have a memo from J. Edgar Hoover to the Justice Department saying, I'm summarizing, but he says, we must prove to the American public that Lee Harvey Oswald is the only assassin of President Kennedy. You see, so right away, he was heading people on one way with a street, and who was going the other way? Well, that was Dorothy, because she didn't believe all this. She didn't, she was right there in the front row. None of this is in the Warren Commission report. None of it's in any books. None of it's in the movie JFK. It's been hiding in plain sight, and hopefully by exposing it now, it can really make people stop and think and say, hey, there was a plot to kill the president. Let's wise up and realize that that's what happened. Yeah,
amazing. Really amazing. Well, I can't say I'm surprised here at all. I mean, should you be surprised by this?
Well, again, we have problems with the government exposing government corruption. They didn't want to do that in 1965. Hoover hid all that material for God knows how long. And then you get to the House Select Committee on Assassinations in 1970s. None of this is in there. You look at all the books. You look at any government exposés, and now you look at the government in 2017 not releasing the documents, and now we have the New York District Attorney's Office with a bogus investigation of Dorothy's death. I have a feeling, and I found a source close to their office, they may have actually found Dorothy's JFK assassination in the evidence file. And they promised when they stopped the investigation, if I came up with new evidence, they would reopen it. I sent a long letter to Cyrus Vance Jr. a week ago Friday, giving them all my new evidence that I have and asking them for a grand jury investigation of Dorothy's death.
So Cy Vance is a real denizen of the swamp, isn't he? His father was a big wig in Jimmy Carter's administration, so you can't really be surprised that nobody wants to wake up the sleeping dogs, can you?
That's a really good way to put it. I've written the book for people that read the first book, The Reporter Who Knew Too Much, and then with the new book, Denial of Justice, it's still a true crime murder mystery and all of that, but all the new images in there, you would love it. I've got Carrie, with Jill and Dorothy singing at the piano, for instance. Of course, got that photograph of him at the townhouse. I've got Jill and Dorothy with George Harrison. I've got Dorothy at the Truman White House. Some amazing, in fact, you'll be interested in this. I've got a photograph of the Kilgallen home in Ireland, and that's, of course, where Dorothy's ancestry was. So there's something for everybody in here, but I really believe that I've been able now to provide more evidence that not only was Dorothy murdered in 1965, but that she had all this material that, as I say, is up on markshawbooks.com about the Jack Ruby trial transcripts.
Amazing. Amazing that how long ago was Jack Ruby tried? I forgot that he even went on trial. I wonder why.
Yeah, he did. In fact, most people don't know, Kerry, that he was tried in 1964, March, and convicted. Melvin Belli used a ludicrous insanity defense that made no sense at all. And in fact, I've been able to show that Belli also knew about the assassination before it happened, but he was convicted, Ruby was. He tried to kill himself 3 times in jail by running himself into a wall, trying to hang himself and all of that. But actually, he died an innocent man because his conviction was overturned due to there being too much publicity in Dallas. And they had scheduled a new trial for him. It was actually going to be in Kansas, of all places. Nobody has ever revealed that. And also an interesting part of this was that the district attorney, Henry Wade, Dorothy learned just before she died that Wade was going to wanted to commute Ruby's sentence, his death sentence. I think the quote that he said, "There's too many unanswered questions." So even the prosecutor of Ruby felt like there was more to it than just this Oswald alone theory.
Is the prosecutor of Ruby still alive?
No, I was able to interview the real trial prosecutor, Bill Alexander, and of course he felt like I did. I've always looked at the assassination as to why Bobby Kennedy wasn't killed instead of why Jack Kennedy was, because as Bill Alexander told me, Bobby had many more enemies, and he heard that Bobby was going to be killed. But of course, if they killed Bobby Kennedy, then Jack Kennedy would come after you with everything the government had. So you kill Bobby Kennedy, and then you kill Jack Kennedy, and Bobby is powerless. So unfortunately, none of those people are alive. But one of them you will be interested in is Joe Tonnahill, who was Jack Ruby's co-counsel with Belli. And on the DorothyKilgallenStory.org, and we refer to this in Denial of Justice, Tonnahill tells us how Dorothy ended up being selected among 400 reporters to interview Ruby. And that's quite an interesting tale. And I've got a picture of the courtroom now showing exactly where they met, right behind the railing there in the Dallas courtroom. Interesting.
Wow. It's all fascinating. And so another book is due? Is that what I'm understanding?
No, it was just released Tuesday. Denial of Justice was released Tuesday, and it has all the Jack Ruby trial transcripts in there, new images of Dorothy, all about her death,
really?
The account of the FBI agents, everything. It came out on the 20th.
Oh, okay. So we're right up there. Hey, where do we find the book? Amazon, obviously. Bookstores.
Yeah, and since the other one did so well, it's in the bookstores and everywhere else. So. Hopefully, it won't be difficult for people to find it and learn more about Dorothy Kilgallen. She was a remarkable woman, as you know, that's for sure.
Oh, we know that for sure. Hey, Mark, I can't thank you enough coming back on the show, letting us know about it. We'll have a link in the show notes to your site so you can get the book right there. And
good.
God, the evidence and, courthouse evidence is probably the best evidence there is, especially a transcript, because it's true, they could have altered this transcript, but there's no indication here that they did. But the fact of the matter is, it's sworn to by the court reporter and often signed off by both sides to the trial. So these are all really amazing things that you've come up with, and I'm sure there's another book in it. We'll look forward, but let's see the government act for a change. That's what I'd like to see, and I'm sure you will.
Yeah, well,
too.
it's all there in Denial of Justice, I think. But it's interesting that you mention that because I still think there may be more information out there about Dorothy. And it's, as I said, this new book would not have been possible if I hadn't heard from a lot of readers and listeners to programs like yours, Carrie. So I thank you so much for having me on. And maybe somebody will listen and get in touch with me and give me some more tips so that I can follow up on them. I'd sure appreciate that.
I'm sure there's a lot more to be found. And perhaps there's some witnesses out there. Let's all hope and pray that the truth comes out. Really, Thank you for your work that you're doing on this, Mark. You've done really incredible work, and it's greatly appreciated. So,
well, you're a good man, Kerry. Thank you so much.
Hey, and by the way, if you've got a question for Mark or myself, email is kl@kerrylutz.com, Twitter feed @KerryLutz, Facebook page Financial Survival Network. Mark, we'll talk to you again real soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.